Welcome again to another episode of I Can Do All Things. And that's like you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. Our core scripture comes from Philippians 4:13 that says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And this show that we're going to have today is a powerful one, because we're going to have someone here today that is going to share an amazing, powerful testimony. So don't go away, actually share it so that other people can hear it too. And this episode is called Nothing is Impossible with God, or with God, nothing is impossible. And you're going to see why. And my guest today is Anna Marie, and I would like Anna Marie to introduce herself to you. So tell them who you are.
Hi, my name is Anna Marie, and I'm a servant of the Lord first and foremost. Yeah.
Where do you go to church?
I go to church. I attend the Way World Outreach in San Bernardino and also in Pomona. I have a job, but I also have a ministry as well. It's called About My Father's Business, because we don't just talk about it. I'm actually about it, hitting the streets in Pomona where I was bound and addicted. So I give back.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
And I'm excited about what you're going to share. I know we had a brief conversation about what God has done in your life.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell you all about it. And then you're going to see that God can take anything and just turn it around. He will turn it around for our good, for those who love them and are called according to his purpose. Yes. And God called you, yes, and he turned your life around. But at one time, things were not like they are now, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about where you grew up. What city? Tell me about your parents, brothers and sisters, a little bit background.
Okay, so I was born in the city of Duarte. I grew up in Monrovia. I have a few brothers and sisters, Edmund and Selena. I have another little brother, Anthony, Alex, Alexandria, Robert, and there's a few more.
How many?
Yeah, there's like 10 of us.
Wow.
But we all have the same dad, not all the same mom. And my parents, up until the age I was 7, they were married. We attended church. I grew up in the church with them. But there was always the drama behind the scenes, you know. After you leave church, you know, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And he did that in our lives, you know, with my family, my mom and dad.
Right. And so eventually you grow up and you get married. Right?
Yeah.
How old were you when you got married?
I was 27 when I got engaged, and a few years later I got married. I already had my daughter. Her name is Juliana. I love her. She's my first miracle. But I was married for a good 10 years, had the good life, had the houses, the cars. I didn't work. I was a stay-at-home mom.
What a blessing.
Yeah, it was good while it was good.
So you had a good life. You were married, and then something happened, right? That turned it all around.
Yeah. So there was cheating in the marriage. So it gave an open door to, you know, that old lifestyle of the gangs and the drugs, and literally that's what took me out. Was that open door of infidelity, like with my husband and stuff. So, yeah.
So how many children did you have when that happened?
I had one.
Juliana.
I had Juliana.
So your husband cheats on you, and what did you do then? Like, where did you guys end up? Did you try to work it out?
From there, it was probably like a year, because he was like, I want you out of the house. I did that. I moved. I saved, and I moved. My daughter and I, we moved to Pomona, to a small trailer park, and I was able to save money there. and then moved to a house in Upland. And it was good, but then,
So he cheats, but then he kicks you out of the house.
yeah, it was his mom's house.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get it. But now you are living with your daughter, and you were able to get yourself another home. And I assume it was a good place.
It
You
was a
were
good place.
happy, and then
It was a good place, but he actually wanted to come back once he seen that I could do it without him. Yeah, he wanted to come back, and I forgave him because I'm like, what's 10 years versus one time?
okay.
So I gave him another chance, and then he wasn't working for a long time, so I just figured, let him just find himself if that's what he needed, not knowing that he was still talking to the girls, still doing what he was doing. I ended up finding out, and that brought rage. Because
So now this is your house. So did you kick him out this
I
time?
did. I did. But it also opened doors to, like I said, rage, and then abuse of drinking and alcohol and partying more, having my girlfriends over, and then it led to drugs, and it was just a downward spiral.
Drugs for him or you?
For me.
For you. And you were turning to the drugs because way of coping with what you were going through?
Yeah, I would say so. It's always like a Band-Aid, it always masks, it always covers up the truth. And I wore that for a very long time. And it took me on a dark road that I ended up losing. Well, after he left, I ended up having another baby with someone else out of wedlock. And my son, his name is Julian, he's now 11. And it took me to, it was different this time doing the drugs. It was like I couldn't stop. Although I wanted to, I couldn't. And it just consumed me instead of me just consuming the drug. And it took me down homelessness and losing everything.
Okay, so you lose your house and now you're in the streets.
Homeless.
And you have 2 kids.
Yes.
So how did that feel?
It was horrible. It was a horrible feeling not knowing where we're going to lay our heads. I asked family for help.
I was going to say, did you ask
I did.
someone to help?
Yeah, because I was very prideful, and to be able to ask my family for help was, I felt ashamed.
Yeah.
Living in the vehicle, I had a Charger, but I traded my Charger for a bigger, I think it was like a Ford Bronco, or I don't know, it was Ford something. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And my kids sleeping in the back seat.
What did you tell them?
I really didn't have anything to say. I felt really ashamed.
They didn't understand why you
No.
were there?
They didn't know, like my daughter. I thank God for her because she was for a young girl, 15, she was very strong.
Wow.
And stuck by my side, helped me with my son, because when you're in addiction, you don't have no sense of, I need help to get off of this thing. It was just like, how can I get more? I wasn't so worried about the kids and what they were going to eat or what they were going to, I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about the drug.
And your daughter, did she realize what was happening to you?
She did, because her asking me asking her for forgiveness, and her actually coming to me when she knew I was in the right state of mind to talk to me about things. Because I asked her, I was like, I didn't understand why she ran away from me. She literally one day just took my son and she ran, pushing him in a stroller. It was a really hard time, and I didn't understand, like, what's wrong with her? Why is she running away from me? But it was, when she came in, she actually told me, she said that I put a knife to her throat and told her I was going to kill her.
Wow.
And I don't remember.
Yeah, and I can see how that you probably, under the influence of the drugs, you probably didn't even realize what you were doing.
Not at all.
But in reality, she was protecting herself
Yeah.
and your son,
Yes.
because she knew that you were not going in the right path.
Right. She just knew that
So,
there was something wrong with me.
so when they ran away, did you know where they ended up going, or you just knew nothing
I
of
knew
them?
nothing. I
So,
knew nothing.
do you know now where she went?
Yeah.
Did she go
With my
look for
sister.
family?
She went with my
Praise God.
sister. My son's dad ended up coming and picking him up, and he still has him to this day. He's 11, and yeah, it's tough, trying to go back and pick up the pieces. But with God, when He says to move and go to court, and He just makes things happen, incredible things.
How long did you actually end up being still in the streets after your daughter and son ran away?
It was I was still stayed in the streets for 6 years because I didn't feel like they deserved me and my brokenness. I didn't feel like they deserved me at all. And that was a lie from the enemy. Like, he kept me in that brokenness and that because anytime I would try to call her, my sister would be like, she doesn't want to talk to you. And it just made it harder, And I understand now that my sister was protecting her and my son. So it was
When
tough.
you were out in the streets, did your family know that you were out there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can say that most of the time that's where I got my drugs from. Because
From your family? Tell us more. That's very intriguing.
well, I mean, I didn't grow like my family. We all come from addiction, and I seen that in them, but I was like, I would never do that. So when I came in my brokenness and I was asking for help, they were like, well, here you go. Here's this, so me getting that and asking for it, they always had it available. And it it wasn't anything that I didn't think was wrong. I didn't think it was wrong at the time.
Right. And in reality, though, when you were asking for help, you really were not asking for them to help you get out of that situation. You were asking for more drugs. Is that honest?
When I had my kids, yes, that's absolutely honest. When I had my kids, I did ask for help. Even if they can sleep there, that I would pay them, and then it was still no. And I just felt like I was like everything was slipping through my fingers, like I couldn't grasp anything or anyone's help. So yeah, when my daughter ran away, I just felt like it was better off. They were better off without me.
When you left with your kids, did you have a job, or you didn't have a job at that time?
I didn't have a job.
Okay.
With my daughter, I did. When I started using drugs again after my husband, I did have a job, and I did, have cars and money still. But then the drugs came in, and everything started again, like just unraveling. Like you're trying to hold on to, and it just unravels. And that's what my life really felt like.
What kind of drugs were you doing?
It started with drinking, and then methamphetamine, and then it just got worse from that point. Because there's different ways to do the drug, and it starts with the line, and then people are like, "Oh, smoke it," and I'm like, "I don't know how to do that," and they're like, "Let me help you," They teach you, and then it went from there to slamming dope, and I always said I would never put a needle in my arm, and it's the every high
goes
is
down.
yeah
You keep wanting more and more.
yeah it's like you can't get enough of it.
Sometimes we see people out there in the streets, and some people wonder, like, why are they out there, or why can't they stop, and why
Right.
don't they get their life together?
Right.
But in reality, it's difficult
very
to
difficult.
get out of it right once you're in
Yeah,
it.
yes,
It just keeps going down
yeah,
and down
yeah.
from there.
It's
Can you tell us a little bit more about what street life is like, and things that happened
Sure.
to you while you were out there?
Yeah, a lot happened to me while I was out there. The first thing I remember was being right there, I remember being hungry, and because I didn't work and I didn't know how to still or, boost is what they call it.
Boost? What
Yeah,
is boost?
like when somebody goes in a store and they
And
steal
they
stuff.
still, oh, okay, that's cool. Okay.
That's, yeah. So I didn't know how to do that, and because I've always worked and I've always had, so this lifestyle was different. And I remember sitting in front of a gas station crying, like somebody will see my cry and they'll help me.
But nobody was.
Nobody helped.
So how did you find food, or how did you get your daily meals? Like, what?
So then I started hustling. The drugs that I would get, I'm like, if I just break a piece off and sell it, I can get something to eat. So when I did that, it would increase my income like double. So, I mean, because people are so desperate for drugs, and I know I was too for sure, that it started the hustle and the grind. It's like, okay, so if I get this, I can give you this, and then people, I mean, they would trade anything, they would steal, and for just to get the drug, they would steal, and they would bring me phones, and they would bring anything, and we would trade it. We would trade, and then I would take my stuff and then I would sell it to other people. And so it's like
You were surviving
yeah,
that way.
yeah.
You became an entrepreneur
I
in the
did.
streets.
did. I did. Yeah, it
And
gets crazy out there, but
was there any point in time that you just either felt like you wanted a way out, or did it become so you became accustomed to the lifestyle that it was just a way of life? You didn't care if you were out of it. How what happened during those 6 years?
those 6 years, at first, it was once I started learning how to hustle and make money and take care of myself through the hustle, it became like, okay, and it was, it became like, oh, like I carried a little bit power. And so that became like an addiction as well, because then I was like, okay, well, if I just give the people what they want without them having to give me money or anything back, then I can get a favor from them. So it became more of like power in the streets, like, oh, ask Annie. And that's what they called me, Annie, instead of Anna Marie is my name. They just shortened it, and I went by Annie for a very long time. And it became more of like power and kind of like authority in the streets. People looked up to me. Prostitutes would come to me and they would ask me like, hey, can you take care of me? And I'll be like, sure can. And I went from, marriage to being gay and helping prostitutes and even like being with them and doing the same thing that pimps do. And it was tough. And I remember there was one prostitute that came to me and she was just like, you can help me. And I was like, sure, I can help you. She had just had a baby, and then word on the street got to me that
Oh,
she just had
wow.
a baby and that her dude was looking for me, and he's a blood. And I was like, who's this dude like trying to get my girl? And then so I ended up finding him and talking with him, and he was like, this is who I am. I'm a man, but my family comes first. And although he was a gang member, he kind of scolded me out there in the streets, and I took it like personal, like, man, if that was me, like I would want somebody to look out for me, and he loves her, and she needs to be home with her kid. So I was like, I seen her, and I was like, come here, let me talk to you. So I literally like send her home. I told her, I said, look, I'm done. You're gonna go home, and you're gonna take care of your kid, and your husband loves you. So a year later, she comes back and they're all together.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
yeah, but I mean, I still had a little bit principle and morals, but I used them to always my advantage. Like, what can I get from this? And I got the lookout from the Bloods and the Crips. So I was very well respected in the streets. But there came a time when I would see stuff like that, I would long to have my family back.
Where were you sleeping?
Um,
And
I would sleep anywhere. Sometimes I would be in a dumpster. and I felt safe there. But most of all, I felt like a piece of trash, discarded, that nobody cared around. Nobody cared where I was or what I would do out there. So it was tough. And I felt like I belonged there in the garbage can.
Did your family ever take you to church when you were young? Were they religious or
My
you didn't
mom
know
and
church?
dad, yeah. I remember doing I think it was called The Book with Greg Laurie. I was probably like around 6, and I remember singing a song, 1 John 4, 7, and 8. And we did a whole big old play in Riverside, and I remember that, and I remember that scripture.
Wow.
And I carried that, like, if God is love.
So you knew that there was a God,
Yeah.
even though you were out there and you were lost.
Yeah.
But do you agree that sometimes even people that are out there knowing God, knowing that God can save you from that lifestyle, you're just bound by the enemy and it's hard to get off?
Bound. Yeah, that's a good explanation. It's for me and my lifestyle that I was living. I just want to go back a little bit. My dad was in and out of church. Like he would be good, and then he would go back. And so for me, my dad being in struggled with addiction, so it was like a generational thing.
So your dad was also
Yeah, he was an
doing
addict.
drugs.
Yeah, and my
What,
mom.
alcohol, drugs,
Same
what,
thing,
everything?
methamphetamines, coke, drinking, alcoholism. My grandfather died of a heart attack, being an alcoholic.
Wow.
My dad was murdered in the streets of Pomona in his addiction. So now coming to Christ, I remember there was a time where I remember like the Lord showed me that I was at the bus stop trying to go somewhere out of the city, and I seen the bus coming and I started to have anxiety. And I felt like there was a leash on my ankle and I couldn't step on the bus. Like I couldn't go. And the bus driver's like, "Are you coming?" And I'm like, "I can't. I'm sorry, I can." And I just started to cry and the bus left. And I'm just like, "Anna, get on the bus. Get on. How hard is it just to get on the bus?" And I couldn't get on the bus. The next bus came and I still couldn't get on. And I just was like screaming like, "What's wrong with me?" I knew that there was something wrong.
There was a stronghold over your life that kept
Yes.
you in that city.
Yes.
And tell me, at what point in time, because I know what your life is like now, did you ever cry out to God during that time that you were in the streets?
I did. I did right in front of the trailer park. And I remember looking across the street. There's a church. And I looked on this side was a motel because everybody would, stay on this side where the motel was and the drug dealing and the prostitution and the whole ring of the enemy, what he was doing. I remember being at that pillar and looking up to the sky. It was probably like 4 a.m. I'll never forget it. And I literally at the top of my lungs, I was like looking up and I'm like, "Where are you? I know you." Help me.
And at what point, because I know that if you cried out to God, he says that cry unto me, look for me, you will find me.
Yes.
And I will answer you. So I know
Yeah.
God was there and he heard your voice.
He did.
At what point did you recognize that it was God opening a door for you to get out of that lifestyle?
He sent my little brother Anthony, to let me know that he loved me. And I was angry when I seen him. I just didn't want to be around. I didn't know he was serving God at the time. He took himself to the men's home, and I remember like walking over to my sister's, and I seen a car, and I walked over and I was like, "Who's here?" And he was like, "Boo," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like what are you doing here?" Like I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to talk with him. He just, he was like, "Hey, come here. I want to talk to you. I love you. Jesus loves you." And I was irritated at that point.
But so you went to your sister's house. So will you do that often?
Right next door. I used to get high right next door to her.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I wouldn't go to her house.
So your sister knew that what you were going through and all that.
Oh yeah, it was always like we always butt heads. So
So there's your little brother. You don't know that he's serving God and he's talking to you about the love of God.
Yeah.
And what was your response?
My
Did you feel
response
like,
is
thank you, God, you're here. You finally
no.
are getting me out of this situation?
No, it was more like a screeching chalkboard, irritation, not knowing that there was something inside of me that couldn't stand the fact that there was light, you know. And I knew when he said that God would restore me, I was like, I don't want to hear it. I just started to walk out of where I was, walk down the stairs, and he still continued to speak life over me. He said, God is a God of restoration. He'll restore you back to your children, Julian and Juliana, and boom, hit me in the heart. I sat down and I started to cry. Like literally, like the Lord sat me down in my addiction because the only thought I had was to go get high. And in that moment, all I can think of is like, how do I get that back? How do I get my kids back?
So it was your kids that actually gave you that opening of, okay, I want that. I want that back.
Yeah. And that's where it began. He came outside and he looked at me and he says, you got to really want it. And I looked at him with tears running down my face. And I said, what do I got to do to get that? And he said, surrender. And there goes my arms. I knew that because I ran from the cops a lot.
Yeah, so you knew what that meant.
I did. I threw my arms up and I said, I surrender. And in that moment, he looked at my sister and said, can she stay here until I can get her in the home tomorrow? And she's like, well, you better get her out of here and she only let me stay in her shed. And I'm so grateful because the only thought I had after that was, let me make it to the next day.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, we are at the end of our show today.
That was fast.
But you got to tune in next week because we're going to talk about how God changed and transformed her life and how God can come in. And if you feel like you're bound and lost, you have no hope, just know that God is there, that with him, nothing is impossible. You can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. Yeah. So tune in next week so that you can hear the rest of the story and how God transformed Anna Marie's life. Thank you for tuning in today.